What do you really know about your investments and your financial advisor? Gary Cinderbrandt, a veteran advisor and founder of Better Path Training, has spent decades helping both financial advisors and their clients get it right when it matters most. Gary pulls back the curtain on the advisory world to reveal the truths, the gaps, and the opportunities that most people never hear about, but absolutely should. It's about more than money. It's about legacy, trust, and making sure the people you care about are in the right hands. Welcome to If the Public Only Knew. Now here's your host, Gary Cinderbrandt.
Welcome back to If the Public Only Knew. I'm Gary Cinderbrandt. Today I'm joined by Michael DeLon, a gentleman that I met through a common client, as I recall, and he and I have had several conversations, and the more I interacted with him, the more, I'd say, valuable I judged his information to be. So I invited him to join us on the podcast, and he graciously agreed. Michael, welcome to If the Public Only Knew.
Gary, thank you. I appreciate it. It's going to be a fun conversation, and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to have you. So, Michael, one of the things I really try and focus on with this podcast is trying to create kind of that intersection of, let's say, the desk that sits between an investor and a financial advisor. Because a lot of times things get lost in translation. Yeah. And as an investor, let's say interviewing a financial advisor, it's very difficult to really understand the person you're talking to if you have no prior experience with them. And oftentimes the advisor has to build credibility over an extended period of time. And quite frequently, that's to the disadvantage of the investor, of the client, because financial advisors can best serve their clients when they have the full picture of everything that's going on, and they can act as the primary advisor.
Yeah.
So this whole issue that you're involved with credibility is fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. If you wouldn't mind, spend a few minutes and tell me, what did your journey look like? How did you get into and find this niche, which I think is at the very heart of that relationship between advisors and investors?
That's a great perspective. I love that, and I can't wait to dive into that. So here's what I'm going to tell you my whole story, okay? It's going to take about 3 minutes, so listen fast, okay? And then from there, you'll understand how I got here and more about me, and then we can dive into all kinds of things. So first off, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I have been married to my wife since 1990. We have 4 children, 2 biological sons, 2 adopted daughters. We did foster care for about 8 years, and that's where both of my daughters came from. So my wife and I got married in 1990, and the first 5 years of our marriage, Gary, were like this. Because my wife and I are complete opposites. And even though she and I both grew up in the church, nobody ever taught us how to be married. So after 5 years of conflict, we went to a family life weekend to remember marriage conference. Now, Family Life's part of Campus Crusade for Christ, and we sat down in a ballroom with about 1,000 people in Indianapolis, and they shared with us God's blueprints for marriage. I didn't know he had any blueprints. So we grabbed them and we started using them in our marriage, and our marriage got a lot better through the 90s. Now, in the 90s is when we had our 2 sons, but in the 90s, I was working for a Christian radio station in central Indiana, and I was in marketing and sales. So I was helping small business owners, selling radio. And what I learned, Gary, is after 2 years, nobody wants to buy Christian radio. What they want to do is sell their products and services. And so I had to decide whether I was going to become really great at selling or really great at marketing. I chose marketing. So I started buying the books, going to the conferences, following the gurus to figure out how do you make marketing work for a small business owner. So that's where I learned marketing back in the 90s. At the end of the 90s, we left the radio station, went to a startup.com. Some friends of mine started a company to localize this thing called the internet back then when Amazon was just getting started, right? So I was with them selling stuff, and they were way ahead of their time. That means they went bankrupt. And so 2 years 2 years later, I'm standing in my living room looking up at the ceiling going, all right, God, what am I supposed to do now? And he spoke to my heart. He's like, Michael, I want you in a ministry to marriages. And I want you at Family Life, that ministry that changed our marriage. And I went, wow, okay. So it's a missionary organization. So we spent 2 years in Indiana raising our financial support. And then we moved to Little Rock, Arkansas, which is the world headquarters for Family Life. Gary, I thought I'd hit nirvana. Why would I do anything other than help build godly marriages and families? So I served there, climbed the corporate ladder. About 6 years later, I'm on the leadership team of Family Life, this international ministry. Things were amazing. Then they started going through corporate reorganizations. And so the third reorganizational chart gets rolled out, and my name's no longer on the leadership team. And they start shuffling me around the ministry to do different things. And that began a 2-year, I call it a prison term, because I was stuck in a job I hated at a ministry I loved. So after 2 years, I had just been sucked dry. And I talked to my wife and I prayed. I said, God, I got to get out of this place. And he says, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to go help business owners with marketing because they struggle with it. They don't like it. And I love it. And God said, go. So on January 1st of 2013, I escaped from prison, Gary. I left the ministry, started a marketing consulting firm. I had one client. I helped him break through some barriers. He'd refer me to you, Gary. And I said, okay, great. So I'd call you. We'd set an appointment. We'd have a great conversation. And somewhere in that conversation, Gary, you'd say, Michael, this sounds really good. Tell me, what have you been doing for the last few years? Who else have you helped? And I said, well, I've helped build marriages and families at Family Life. And you'd say, Michael, that's honorable. Way to go. Oh, look at the time. I do have another meeting coming up. Can we reschedule this, Michael, and keep our conversation going? And you'd usher me right out the door. So I couldn't get a client, Gary. And I knew I had to fix that. So I went to my church one day, second floor. I was pacing the hallways, just crying out to God, saying, how do I help Gary? Because I know I can. And God just kind of spoke to my heart. He's like, Michael, take all of your marketing ideas and put them in a book. And so I did. So back in 2013, Gary, I wrote my first book. It's called On Marketing. And I published it. Then I would call you. I'd set an appointment. I'd mail a copy of my book to you. I'd walk into your office a week later, and there it was. My book was on your desk, dog-eared, highlighted, underlined. You'd read my book. And in that meeting, you'd pull my book out. You'd say, hey, now, Michael, I read your book in right here. You said this. And you'd quote something that I wrote. And you said, how do you help me do that? And I started gaining clients. And I stopped and I said, now, wait a minute, what changed? The only thing that changed, Gary, is the fact that I became a published author. And when I walked into your room, I had instant credibility because you saw me and thought of me as an expert in marketing because I had a book. And that's when the light bulb came on for me and the seed got planted to create what today is Paperback Expert. We're a professional book publisher for busy entrepreneurs. We help you create a book without writing a word, and then we teach you how to use your book to gain clients based on what I've done with marketing and everything. So that is my long story in about 3 minutes, but it gives you hopefully some understanding of how in the world did I get here and why do I do what I do. Does that make sense?
It's compelling. And it's the logical progression seems like part serendipity and part good common sense.
Yeah.
Walk me through, if you would, two sides of it. Clearly, technology has evolved and continues to do so in the publishing business. How did you go about and learn how to write and publish your first book?
Yeah, so I did it by the School of Hard Knocks. I knew what I wanted to say because I knew my marketing philosophies and strategies. And so I just went down and I first did what I call the brain dump. I opened up back then a Word document and I just started typing everything that I wanted to. And then I took that and I started organizing it into kind of chapters. And then I started typing. Now, I'm a publisher, Gary, and I'm going to tell you and all of you, never write a book. And what I mean by that is don't type it because you get self-editing. And I remember sitting there going, no, backspace, backspace, backspace. That's not what I wanted. It took me forever. And I swore I'd never do that again. So I always tell people, don't write a book, speak to write a book. And that's our process today. But I went through and I just formulated, what do I want to say? And I made chapters and I put stories in it and examples. And I sat back and I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to say. And then I had to figure out, how do you get a cover designed? So I had to go find a cover designer. And how do you get that thing called the ISBN? What in the world is that? So I had to figure it all out. And that's why I created my company, so that my clients don't have to figure any of it out, right? But the other thing about to our family part is my wife is a homeschooling teacher. She's homeschooled all of our kids, and my eldest son is like brilliant, off the chart, like Doogie Howser. So he understands English and all this. So I handed them my manuscript when I was ready to publish, and they went through it with a red pen. And oh boy, did we have some heated discussions. Go, no, no, I want it to sound like me. Well, you can't do that, Daddy, because of this. I'm like, no, 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 no. So it was a real fun process back and forth to go, here's what I'm trying to do. And it was totally, I had to figure this thing out, and I just started down the pathway. And when I hit a brick wall, I climbed over it, I went around it, I went through it, and I figured it out because other people had done it. I know it could be done. I just didn't have a pathway. So that's how we did it.
Yeah, it's interesting because to me, the definition of wisdom has always been the combination of the experiences you have
Mhm.
and the ability to reflect back on those
Mhm.
experiences.
Yeah.
And obviously, that's where I think true learning comes from.
Oh, yeah.
So, at what point, when you realized that the book was starting to gain you some traction from the marketing perspective, at what point did you recognize that that pathway could be recreated for other people in a similar situation? And if you would also comment on the types of professionals you now interact with that have found benefit from what you do.
Yeah. So when I published my book and I started gaining clients, that's when the idea was like, okay, this is something that's different. It's a different marketing perspective because of the credibility of becoming an author does, right? That's probably the moment I knew I had something. And then I went to a BNI group because I asked myself, where do business owners gather? Well, a lot of them gather at BNI. So I went there one time. And if you've ever been to a BNI group, you get up and you do your 60-second dog and pony show at the beginning, right? And I remember going there and I said, I'm Michael DeLon with Paperback Expert, and I can help you create a book without writing a word. And every head went, what? I mean, they never heard anything like this. And when that happened at 2 or 3 BNIs, I said, this is something. And at the second BNI group, I had a guy right across the table from me look at me. He says, this is going to sound weird, but I was in the shower this morning thinking that I needed to write a book, and you're here. We need to talk. And he became my second client. So that's when I knew I had something. And I'd already developed in concept the speak to write process. It actually started with 3x5 cards. That's how we would work on a table to build the outline with the client. And then I go to, so it started grassroots, but I knew my audience, who are primarily financial advisors, attorneys, professionals where it's a high trust environment. Okay, so we're not dealing with widget sellers. We're dealing with experts who have great knowledge, who have to empathize with their clients, who have to understand them, and their clients have to trust you. That's my clientele. So financial advisors, wealth advisors, attorneys, estate attorneys, PI attorneys, all of that. Those have been the core of our audience. They're busy. They don't want to write a book. They're communicators. They're thought leaders. They have a lot of information in their head. It just looks like spaghetti. They don't know how to communicate. That's okay. I can take care of all of that, and I can get your unique story. What's different about you? And what I find, Gary, is that is really the key element that opens up the floodgates, because I help you build that common ground of trust right out of the gate. And then we allow your audience, your prospect, to spend an hour or two reading your book with you and getting to know you before they ever reach out to you. And that just greases the skids, as they would say, to make the relationship, take it to a whole new level, so that you're in a better opportunity and position to really serve people well. Did that answer those questions?
It really did. And you touched on a couple of things I just want to highlight from my own level of experience. Um, in the world of financial advisory, the questions that will normally get asked at a first meeting or encounter, such as someone asking a financial advisor, well, what is it that you do? And they're going to give them their value proposition.
Yeah.
Well, to me, that's always been a little bit odd because how can you propose something to someone when they have no prior experience whatsoever with you or what you've done? They don't know who you are. They're just hearing a bunch of words put together. So I recognized pretty early in my career that the first transaction I wanted to do with any prospective client was an exchange of information. I wanted to learn about them, but they needed to learn about me.
Yes.
So I came up with this concept of creating what's called an investment introduction. And it's about a 15 or 20-minute discussion, primarily relying on charts and graphs and things that just kind of demonstrate different movements in the market. And it gets into the emotional side. It also gets into things like confirmation bias and recency bias, emotional decisions, which normally work against an investor's long-term success.
Yeah.
And what I found was that as I'd conclude the presentation, and I was always paying attention to whether or not the people I was talking to were really focused on the information. What I found was at the end, had I administered a test on everything I'd just given them, odds are they probably wouldn't have passed.
Mm-hmm.
But what I finally realized was it wasn't getting them to pass. It was giving them comfort in the fact that they knew that I knew what I
Yes.
was talking about and that
100%.
I understood their fears. I understood their concerns, and all of those things would be taken into account. So I 100% agree with you on what you're saying. And I would imagine that if there's a couple that's looking to hire a financial advisor to advise them on their affairs, and there's advisor A who's got a good reputation and been recommended to him, advisor B, good reputation, been recommended to him, with a book, it
Mm-hmm.
seems to me that advisor B is probably going to get the nod more often than not.
Oh, without question. And it's not because advisor B is promoting himself saying, "Look at me and how important I am, how smart I am." It's totally the opposite. It's that, I mean, how do we build trust with anybody, Gary? It's a factor of how much time do we spend together. And when you give somebody a book as one level, they're going to spend an hour or two with you, maybe not all in one setting, maybe over, but they're going to think about what you just said. They're going to make notes and they're going to start feeling better about you. Now, if you take that to the next level and allow them on your website or YouTube or something to watch some videos that you've created explaining who you are, what you do, how you help people, they're going to spend some more time with you. I think, and I heard this the other day, a stat, about 85% of buying decisions happen before they schedule the call to meet with you. That's what we are helping our clients do, is create those buying habits before the first conversation ever happens, so that when you do meet, they are pre-sold on working with you, and you can have those conversations to go, here's how we operate. Help me understand where you are, where you're wanting to go. Let's have a discussion, see if we're a good fit, and then we can go to the next step, because they already know who you are and how you. It's all been done before that first appointment. Shortens the sales cycle, elevates trust, decreases anxiety, takes away a lot of the fears, and all of this, as you know, it's all an emotional play because we make decisions emotionally. Especially if I'm going to hand you my life savings and my future, I have to know that you are trustworthy and that you know the pathways I need to take and can answer my questions on this rat maze called finances and wealth.
That makes a lot of sense. So, Michael, walk me through a financial advisor retains you to tell their story.
Mm.
Walk me through everything that happens from the time you're formally retained to the publication date and marketing of the book. What does that top line process look like?
Yeah. First 2 weeks, you work with me on my process to discover your unique message, I call it your signature message. What's different about you from everybody else? Okay. I don't want you to become somebody else. I want to discover who you are. And from that, we frame the theme and title of your book. Okay. So once that's created, then I bring one of my writers to the table. I've got 10 professional writers through a series of Zoom calls about an hour a week for about 10 weeks. We're having interviews with you to build the outline for your book and then creating the content of your book as you are actually speaking to write your book through a conversation with your writer. Okay. Once that's done, our writer goes back and starts crafting your manuscript using the words you've told us. So your book is actually in your words. It's your voice. It's your message. So we write like 2 chapters. We send them to you and say, Gary, review these 2 chapters. Have we captured your tone, your voice, your message? If the rest of your book's written like these 2 chapters, are you going to be happy with it? And as soon as you can say yes, then we just write chapter after chapter. We send it to you for review. You send your writer any changes. We make all the changes. Voila, in a few weeks, your manuscript's done. Then it goes into editing and proofreading, and then finally cover design and interior design, and then publication to Amazon. We take care of everything, okay? It takes less than 24 clock hours of your time. It takes us 6 months from today to when your book's published. Then our promotion team comes to the table. And we promote you to be an Amazon best-selling author, guaranteed. We have the know-how, the team, the framework. We understand exactly what to do to make that happen. And we do that for credibility purposes. Because when you hand somebody a book and it says national bestseller or #1 Amazon, they go, wow. It's what happens in the mind. It's how people perceive you that changes the game. Remember my story? I was a nobody until you saw me as an expert. That's exactly what happens. So that part is really cool. That takes about 6 months. But during this whole process, Gary, is where the magic happens. And what we do is during that 6 months of you creating your book, working with your writer, you're working with me in my coaching program with my clients where we are teaching you our credibility marketing systems so that you will know what to do with your book, how to use your book to gain clients and get referrals. And I give you my marketing systems that I've created. And I say, Gary, here, if you want to get more referrals from your clients, here's exactly the script you need to say. Make it sound like Gary, but here's the script. Here's when you do it, and here's the results. Gary, if you want to build networks of referral sources coming to you, here's an approach you should take with your book to do that. Gary, if you want to convert more leads that are coming in from LinkedIn or whatever using your book and nurture them, here's how you do that. And we give you the templates. So we're teaching you how to market as an author, because that's different, during the process, so that when your book's published, you now have an entire marketing game plan that you can run with to monetize your book. And because we've done this for so long and we know it works, I back up what I do with the 2-year money-back guarantee because I know it works. So, case in point, can I tell one story about a financial
Please
advisor?
do. Yes.
Okay. Lynn came to me. Lynn's up in Canada. She's a great lady. She's been doing financial advising for years. She wrote her first book years ago by herself, didn't really know what to do with it. She started writing her second book and got frustrated, found me, came to me and says, Michael, help. So we started working with her. We went through our whole process. Lynn had a neat process, but it didn't have a name. And so I looked into who she is. We positioned her as the financial architect for Canadians. Okay, because of her background. Created her book. It's got houses and architectural things on it. And then I took her process. I looked at what she does, and I created this acronym, RETIRE. And on the back, retire is review your foundation, envision your future, trim your taxes, right? 6 things that she's already doing. I just named it. And now she has a book called Retire on Purpose. And that's what the book's all about. So it's given her a signature message, a distinction. So now when somebody says, well, what do you do, Lynn? She doesn't say, well, I'm a financial advisor for Canadians. She says, I help you retire on purpose using my 6-step process. Well, tell me about that, Lynn. Now she has a conversation, right? Changes everything. The fun part, Gary, is we published her book, made her an Amazon best-selling author. She's like, Michael, what do I do with my book now? And I said, Lynn, because I know she's done like conferences and seminars and all kinds of stuff. I said, do you have like a database of people that like been to your stuff? And she's like, well, yeah. I said, okay, how big is it? She's like 600 people. Great. I said, I want you to send an email out to 600 people. Here's the subject line: don't buy my book. And then they open it and it says, I want to give you a free copy of my new Amazon best-selling book. Just tell me where to mail it and I'll send it to you absolutely free. She had 80 people say, yes, I want your book. She mailed out 80 copies of your book. And Gary, within 60 days, she had gained 10 clients and made over $75,000 from that one strategy. And she's like, Michael, I've paid for my book. The rest is going to be gravy. What else should I do? And we're helping her build more things. So that's a high-level process of how we work with people, but how simple it is to monetize your expertise when you have something of value to put into people's hands. Those people were ready to do something. They needed a next step, and her book was that next step. So
makes perfect sense, and it absolutely comports with my own experience, not at writing a book, but it really giving the value up front to someone so they see and recognize who you are and what you do. Michael, how do people find you if they're interested in learning more?
Paperbackexpert.com. It's our website. That is the hub of all things Michael. There's free resources there. You can schedule a call with me, whatever you want. Paperbackexpert.com.
Michael, it's fascinating, and I really was thinking to myself, how applicable this is, not just across the financial advisory world, but across any profession that is primarily service-based, where there's got to be a high bar of trust before things continue. So I want to thank you so much for joining us here today on the podcast.
You're welcome.
And then again, folks, if you have an interest, you can find Michael at paperbackexpert.com. My guest today has been Michael DeLon. This has been Gary Cinderbrand on If the Public Only Knew. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for checking out If the Public Only Knew with Gary Cinderbrand. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to follow the show and share it with another advisor, investor, or friend. For more on Gary, or to check out any links mentioned in the episode, head to the show notes. We'll see you next time.